Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today is all about choices, how they get made, both by marketers and by those we are marketing to. But if I can first ask one thing from you as you hear this episode, it would be letting me know that you listened. You can reply to a tweet or comment on a post on Instagram or chime in on something I've said on LinkedIn. It means a whole lot to me to know that this is something you're giving your time to. For today's episode, we're going to talk about choice. And as we were recording the episode, we clearly chose to take the conversation into many aspects of choice that not only prospects face, but that we marketers ourselves face. And the person that I have on today's show is more than competent for this conversation. Upon graduating, he was in the space sector, working in academia and also in industry. From there, he founded a solar energy venture. He built several web applications. But the discipline that had always had an attraction for him because of how powerful it was marketing. And so he decided to begin and build the marketing agency, which is based in Montreal, Canada. I want you to listen as we talk about targeting of marketing channels through the lens of content and segmentation. And then we'll move on to talking about how widgets and calculators can be used on a website to help prospects make their own decisions, as he says it, seeing the results evolve before their eyes. Please join me in listening to this very special conversation with Oz Gurtuna. I'm glad to welcome Oz Gurtuna. Welcome, Oz.
Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to whoever's listening here. I'm interested in talking with you about channels that we have for targeting our prospects. And I think it's an area that a lot of us will put heavy thought into, but then after we, let's say, have put up some content or launched a campaign, we kind of dismiss it from our mind, right? And what do you see as being the main problem with, picking one channel and then starting on that? Isn't that a good step, or should we go further?
Well, I think we should definitely go further. And as we all know, it takes a lot of time to specialize on any given platform. And over time, you feel comfortable. We know the ins and outs of different platforms we use. And the platforms introduce new features. So everything seems to be fine. But if we were to take a step back and look at our options, I think most of us would realize that there's definitely some value in diversifying away some of our ad investments. And I think we all have our favorite platforms, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we think that we, as agencies, we can add a lot of value to the campaigns that we're running if we can look into what some of the other platforms have to offer. And it's not always easy. So the platforms, as we all know, they're not always helping each other. And there's a sense of obviously trying to build long-term relationships with their users. So sometimes there's a bit of friction. Sometimes there's some tools, some import tools, for example, that you could use to link your existing platform to a new one. But in any case, there's some work involved, but I think it's definitely worth looking into it.
Yeah, you've raised a good point there. And let's talk about the creative for a minute. So obviously inside of, marketing, what we mean by creative is the assets, the text, the image, the video that is going to be used. You can also call it content because, of course, if you're just putting it out and not advertising with it, that's what it is. You've made a good point that these platforms, they're in a competitive world, so they want to try and accommodate whatever kind of creative we have. So they're going to step into, each other's competitive space and try and give us that. Maybe if I can ask you on that score, what's your take with, if I have image kind of assets, and let's say I am looking at Pinterest, should I just try to make an ad for Pinterest, but then also slap that same image on other platforms that accommodate images? Is there a little bit more to it than that, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, overall, again, I think it's a great idea to be testing your creatives on different platforms, especially because you can match it with different audience targeting types, different combinations in your campaigns, but of course, there's a lot of effort that you have to put into creating great visuals. We looked into this a bit, trying to understand some of the common dimensions, for example, some common formats of display ads, of all things, the square format seems to be almost a universal one that you could use across platforms. But if you were, for example, more interested in a stories look, you may want to go for a full portrait mode, in which case you may not be able to use that across all of the platforms. So there's a bit of finesse, there's a bit of planning involved, of course, when you're trying to match these creatives. But yeah, I mean, if you were to take your example, if you start with Pinterest, let's say you're comfortable in that medium, and you're going to use that image, and then if you were to, let's say, invest in a little Google display campaign, just so that you can better understand some of the audiences using the same visual, that might be actually sort of a good experiment to run. So yeah, and I think there are quite a few tools available that help you these days with preparing some of your creatives as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly not as manual as it used to be.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Thank goodness for that.
Yes.
You've kind of talked about the stories element there. Let's kind of talk about video for a second. Everybody, of course, their mind goes to YouTube, but we obviously shouldn't stop there. And the targeting that happens with video can be quite different if we're looking at other platforms like the Facebook ecosystem obviously accommodates video, and it's like stories. It is being adopted by many other platforms. What should we start to ask ourselves about the audiences that we have if we're going to try and rank these platforms and figure out which ones should surface and be at the top of the pile for us?
Wow, I think that's a terrific question. Video, by and large, in my mind at least, is all about interruption marketing. So people, most of the time, they haven't really deliberately searched for your service or product. They may be at that moment doing something completely different. And through audience targeting, you have this privilege of suddenly appearing in front of them, and you're trying to connect with them. So it's, in my mind, it's really about storytelling. And all the technical formats of the video, of course, those are important too. The production quality is important too. But by and large, it's about the story, your narrative. What are you trying to achieve with that video? And so if you think about the platforms out there, ranging from, let's say, Microsoft ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, Amazon ads, Pinterest, TikTok, you name them, not all of them are as strong when it comes to video as the medium. Of course, we think of YouTube immediately. That's very natural. As you mentioned, Facebook is also very, very strong in video ads. But the other platforms, I think, are trying to, they're struggling. They're trying to catch up, and it's not easy. And today, I think, apart from Microsoft ads, video is widely available as a format, as far as I know. So if you're investing in producing a video, I think it's great to understand the requirements of the platforms, so that you can maybe come up with an asset that you can use across, again, all of the platforms if possible. And we looked into this too, and it is confusing, ranging from what kind of resolution, what kind of format, what kind of codec, what kind of technical requirements. It was a bit of a challenge to try to come up with some general recommendations. But like a general, basic landscape format, again, maybe a square format for your videos is really a good start. But that's just your canvas, right? What's a lot more important is what you put into that as your messaging.
I love the point that you make that you should try wherever possible to get the raw asset to cover as many platforms as possible. The one thing that came to mind for me was those little subtitles files. There are industry formats like SRT that you can put in, and we have to remember that a lot of the time, especially on a feed-based ad, it's going to start off muted, right? So you want those captions showing up so that people understand there's talking going, because maybe it's off camera, right? It's a voiceover. So they'll clue in, and then they'll get the full exposure to the ad.
That's it. That's an excellent point. Yes.
Yeah. So you want to have that ready. Now, that doesn't mean automatically that you want to blast it everywhere all at once. Back to this notion of like ranking. Are you a fan of like dividing whether I'm in B2B or B2C and helping me prioritize different platforms based on that?
Oh, I'm a huge fan. I think it's one of the first things that we should be discussing with our clients. I typically ask them a very simple question, which is, give me your top 3 objectives, and give me your ideal customer. These are very simple questions, but the answers are actually very, very difficult. And most of the time, I think the clients feel like they have some homework to do. It's because we start with certain campaigns, or we're building a business, and we don't necessarily stop and ask ourselves on a regular basis, okay, who is my ideal customer? Or what are my top objectives in advertising this year? I think answering some of those questions, for example, am I interested in B2B leads or B2C leads? It makes a tremendous difference. Because just like we were talking about video, some of the platforms are much better in B2C, and some of them are much better at B2B. And if you take a B2B platform and try to advertise to the general public, you may realize that your cost per acquisition is going to go through the roof. Yeah. So it's really important to understand who you're trying to connect with, and and within which context are you trying to, is it an event management for an event management campaign? Are you trying to target a certain B2B audience for a particular event? So you have sort of a strict deadline in your campaigns, or are you do you have a home services company that you're helping with, and it's mostly B2C, and they're happy to have new clients throughout the year? These things really make a difference in the optimal combination of platforms you would use. Even the creative, I would say.
Yeah, it does. Another part is what you're asking them to do. So we have, and this is where it's gotten really interesting in the last couple of years. We used to have a very clear line between if I want to send somebody to my website to get them as a lead, or do I want to just get that lead information, and I'm not too concerned with, bringing them to my website. But let's talk, and I'm sure this bubbles up in those 3 objectives that you ask about, what things do we need to consider with there? It's now apparent that each of these platforms is clearly reaching over into the other category. The example that comes to my mind is Google Ads lead gen format ads. Yes, right, that's sitting I'm on a search platform. I would expect on a search platform that everybody's going to go to my website. Not so. No. This is the type of ad that's going to open up. There's a small area where the user can put in some information, and they put it in, they close it, and then they continue on the search engine. They never get to my site.
Of course, of course. That was an interesting extension. I think that they released. Facebook has something similar as well.
Right.
And I mean, even today, if you were to Google some sort of a unit conversion, or if your favorite actor, you're going to get the information right there on the search results. Google
Right.
doesn't want you to leave that search page, and I think it's a very interesting discussion, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. But I still believe that establishing a direct link, a connection with your audience is key. And as we've seen with what happened with the latest iOS changes, user privacy is becoming a very important concern, and rightly so. I'm a consumer. I understand. I get it, and which makes it even more important for us when we're building brands. It's becoming more and more strategic to establish that dialogue and keep it going. So for me, it's never about a simple lead generation form. It's an invitation to start, hopefully, a very long relationship between the brand and the consumer. And if you're also delegating that to the search engines of this world, then our brand is, again, one step further removed from the consumers. Essentially, we're giving the relationship, we're gifting it to the Googles and Amazons of this world. Whether or not we can, do something about this as agencies, as brand owners, I'm not sure. But if you have a choice, I would definitely recommend trying to be a lot more involved in that interaction.
For anybody who was around when the follow us on our Facebook page happened, so going back maybe 8-9 years now, we're recording this in 2022, they'll identify immediately with what you said. We were all we could have seen it coming, but I suppose we were willfully blind to handing over the relationship and letting the social platform be the watering hole where our users would gather and us. But of course, we don't have control over that. This is, I think, coming back into the fore with the array of push notifications and kind of a DM format. The LinkedIn newsletters, for example, are coming to mind because they've recently allowed companies to do that. Of course, the company page is the entity from which you would build an ad on top. And I am absolutely sure that LinkedIn will start to use that and say, do you want to get a hold of your company page followers or other audiences? Fine. For now, it's free.
Of course.
Not always so.
Yeah, probably they're testing things. For me, I think one of the classic examples of this is in e-commerce, and how, for example, if you're selling on Amazon and if you're advertising on Amazon, you think that you're investing in the future of your brand, and which you are, of course you are, but at the same time, by limiting yourself to this ecosystem, you are gifting that relationship between the consumer and the brand to Amazon. So yes, you are making money at the end of the day. But if the alternative was, for example, to bring them to your e-commerce store on Shopify or WooCommerce or any other type of e-commerce platform, and then have the contact information of your consumers, for example, then you could switch to something like email marketing. And then you would start with a paid channel and then switch to email marketing, which could make advertising a lot more cost efficient for you in the long term. Whereas if you were to leave everything in Amazon's own ecosystem, then you're sort of, again, entering into a tightly controlled space where, as a brand owner, you don't have full control on the interaction. For both lead generation and e-commerce, I think there's many examples of this. Content is very, very strategic. It's very important. And so is that relationship between people looking for a particular product and service and your own brand. So
yes, you've taken us into a whole new area of targeting we haven't talked about yet, which is behavior and past browsing. Of course, you just brought it up there. I bring somebody to my website. I now have the ability to retarget them. This is provided that I have put the tags on my website for the various channels that have that capability. But this is, now something that I've got the right to do. And let's say that they don't buy the very first time, or I don't get that email the very first visit. I now have the ability to, within some period of time that makes sense for this customer, to imagine that I'm helping them on the next step of their journey. If they do intend to eventually come around to buying something, I want it to be from me, right? What's your take on how retargeting is working these days and what role it plays in our effort to bring in these customers?
Oh, I think remarketing still plays a very important role. And as most of us probably know, during that first touch point, that first interaction, not too many things happen, right? It's just a quick hello, a quick introduction. Mm-hmm. And for certain lead generation campaigns, it may take us more than 10 touch points before we actually have a lead. Or if you're trying to sell a product, it may take 2, 3, 4, 5 visits before the person finally decides to purchase something from us. So remarketing is definitely an important part of that, additional rounds of interaction. But again, coming back to a more privacy-centric world, it lost some of its power. Especially because of third-party tracking cookies being disabled. We've seen about a 30% decline, I would say, on average, across our client accounts in terms of the audiences that we're able to reach through remarketing. So suddenly, let's say 30% of our visitors they just vanished.
Right.
And if you were using platforms that are using these third-party cookie technologies, which most remarketing platforms do, suddenly you weren't able to reach them anymore. And that brings me back to email marketing. But if you were able to capture their email, then you're fine, because you can continue with the interaction in a way that you can control much, much finely compared to running some remarketing campaign.
Yeah.
So this is one thing. And the second thing, very quickly, is how different campaigns are evolving across platforms that incorporate remarketing. So Google had, for example, a shopping campaign, which is now called a standard shopping campaign. And then they made it a smart shopping campaign and added the capability to do automatic remarketing. And then more recently, they introduced Performance Max, which sort of folded all sorts of different campaign types under the same roof. And remarketing is built in. So it's definitely going strong. It's going to be, I think, a big part of our portfolio in the future. But the nature of remarketing itself is changing.
Yeah, and it's a separation where the playing field has been tilted. If we think of who has gained, like Google, with their Performance Max campaigns and things that leverage all of the information that they have on both on the user, including the information you share with them through Google Analytics. They certainly have a leg up. Who's been, for example, on the going out phase have been some of the native targeting platforms like Outbrain and Taboola, who have suffered with not being able to get that same information. So let's talk for a minute, though, about, and I agree with you that capturing emails matters. As a matter of fact, it may even be the call to action, because the value of it, if we don't think, like, let's say we have a considered purchase. Let's say somebody is looking at putting a $20,000 solar roof on their house. That's not going to be something they're going to do in one visit. It may even be worth our while in our entire funnel to get them onto our website, to get an email address, or involve them somehow at an early stage so that we have the opportunity to reach out to them later. Can you tell me a little bit about how you see that?
I see this as, it's a little like the story of the humble pencil and the typewriter, in the sense that we're still using pencils, and they've been around for hundreds of years, but not too many of us are using typewriters anymore. I think when people think about email, they think, oh, that's so, late 1980s, early 90s, but it's actually a modern platform in a certain sense. And I think it's very, very valuable because it's still one of those few channels that we have that give us a chance to have a direct connection with our prospective customers. Of course, we all hate email spam. I'm not talking about that. Please, if anybody is thinking about buying an email list and
Right.
emailing 5,000 people, do not do that. That's not what I mean at all. It's more about giving people what they want. And in order to be able to do that content-wise, you have to understand what they're looking for. And that's why personalized email content and drip campaigns or email flows are becoming more and more important and useful. So when I have this discussion with my clients, when we're crafting an email marketing strategy together, the objective is to send emails that people are delighted to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you send an email every day, it's pretty difficult to achieve that. But if you get the right frequency, if you get the right content, then they might actually be very happy to receive that email. Again, in the example that you mentioned, residential solar, which is very near and dear to my heart, I think it can be such a complex investment for most homeowners that if they see you really holding their hand from the beginning, aligning your interests with their interests, and explaining to them how this could work, for example, using an email series of 3 or 4 emails, that I can see gaining some traction. So obviously you have to invest in the platform, the email platform that you would like to use, but more importantly, you have to invest in that personalized content that they really will find useful. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's well worth the investment.
I gather, and let's use solar for this, that behind the scenes, it's important to have some segments that you can put people in. You're not only capturing, let's say, an email, which is great. That's something that you own. No platform will take that away. It's a protocol that the whole internet uses. But you will start to, I'm sure, use some other pieces of information, some which you explicitly ask them for, but maybe others that are implicit, right? So it's going to completely vary by what industry you're in. I guess in solar, one of the most important pieces of information is, are you in a part of the world that has a high amount of sunlight or a low amount of sunlight? How many daytime hours, right? So how do you think of a funnel in something like that, and in kind of bringing pieces of data together that will accumulate over time to give you the best opportunity to give that person a relative message? How do you see that?
Wow, another excellent question. There's no easy answers to that, but I think what you could do is to structure the entire experience starting, for example, with the URL that you'll be using as your landing pages, and doing some segmentation at this landing page level. And I'm mentioning landing pages because it's one of the easiest ways to better understand what your users are looking for. Going back to the solar example, you could have, for example, a landing page for a residential prospect, and then you could have another landing page for a commercial prospect who might be interested in getting solar panels for, let's say, their workshop, or it could be a retail unit, because those two types of customers are going to have different needs when it comes to solar. Some of the basics will be the same, but in terms of permits, in terms of the structures, there's going to be quite a few differences, again, on average. So simply by using multiple landing pages at the beginning, and then passing that information to your email management system or your email automation system, you will be able to do your first level of segmentation. And then you could use the forms, naturally. That's one of the easiest ways to do this, by asking them some very easy to answer questions. You could get some further information, for example, their monthly electricity bill, which is a very important data point, and it will give you all sorts of indications about whether or not solar is going to work for them. And then let's say you combine the landing pages with that form field, and now you have a couple data points that will enable you to create 3 or 4 different types of content that will be perhaps the first emails that you're going to send out. So you're paying more than $1,000 per month on your electricity bill on your commercial property. Here are some ways we could help you. And when the person receives that email, I think they're going to feel like, oh, okay, these people get me. They understand what I'm trying to achieve, as opposed to sending them an email, for example, about, I don't know, portable solar units for camping, which is totally out of context for them.
And maybe you sell that, but it has nothing to do with why they were interested, clearly by the information that they have, brought your way.
Indeed. Yes.
So then even the content of the email could be, I guess, and you'd say it obliquely, but you could say something like, what people who pay over $1,000 a month for their corporate electricity bill have learned by installing solar.
I think you should
that's
write
going to get their attention.
I think you should write that piece. That's exactly it.
Right. Yeah. And you also, and I know you're a fan of this because, like me, you're kind of data obsessed, that you can even, as you collect enough of this information, you can even get these ranges from this user-generated information and feed it back to people to kind of either interactively helping them understand where they are vis-a-vis their peers, or I know that you favor sometimes even bolting it on to other pieces of information, such as recommendations, right? So tell us a bit more about how you like to make people educated on what this purchase is by showing yourself as an authority. And frankly, you're doing it just by taking other pieces of data that other people have provided and just showing it back to them in a new way.
Yes, of course. I think I do believe in the value of tools that are easy to use, and whatever the topic might be. It could be about choosing your ad platform if you're on the agency side. It could be about deciding whether solar energy is good for you or not. It could be about looking for a recipe with a certain ingredient, and all of these have something in common, which is the interface that you need to build so that people don't find it too technical. I think that was one of the hardest lessons that I learned. Glenn, as you mentioned, I'm a little obsessed with data. I love trying to make sense of the world through data. But one of my biggest mistakes was to assume that well, yeah, the general population is also very interested in spending hours and hours running calculations and then trying to interpret the results. No, they're not. What they're interested in is, feeling good about a certain decision by maybe looking at some of the trade-offs, playing around with some of the key variables, and then seeing the result evolve in front of their eyes so that they can understand the impact of some of these decisions. And the quicker they can see this, the better. They don't want to spend tons of time on these tools.
Right.
And so if you take the solar, for example, one thing we learned was, is, as you mentioned, the solar insolation levels, the level of sunshine at a given latitude, longitude, that is quite important, but it's not as important as the cost of electricity in that area, in the sense that if you take somewhere like Northeast US or British Columbia in Canada, where electricity prices can be quite high,
Right.
even though you may not get tons of sunshine, it can still make a lot of sense for you to go solar. Whereas where I am in Quebec, electricity is it's so affordable that compared to like a neighboring town in Ontario, it still wouldn't make financial sense for people to go solar. So why am I mentioning this? Because yes, when you think of solar, this is just, again, an example, you think about the solar radiation levels, but it turns out cost of electricity is a lot more important as a variable in that decision. So if you don't use that in the tool that you're building, or if you don't even supply the information to the user, that's the other thing. If you ask people, for example, okay, how much does electricity cost where you are? They may not even know that. So that's homework for them to go and get it. But if you provide it based on their location, even better. Their life is easier. They're having a better, quicker experience. And I think they're also feeling a bit more attached to your brand because you just, made life easier for them. So yeah, I mean, I'm talking about very general design principles here, but if anybody's thinking about building a tool, please think of your users first, put them at the center of the design, and even if you may be super interested in detailed calculations, try to keep it as simple as possible.
Sure. But I think just from that example, you've helped me see that if I am the marketer who's trying to build it, yes, it doesn't have to be that complicated. If I were to dream how you might do a calculator like that, having a table on a, let's say, a Google Sheet, which has each one of the states and provinces in North America and the peak electricity charges in each one. Sure, it's a little bit of elbow grease to go get that, but you have done little more, I think, than look up that information and, point out to them what the difference is between that and, the amount of energy that they could get out of solar. Right? This doesn't have to be, assemble a SWAT team of PhDs, right?
No, definitely not. And today there are so many tools available for us to sort of build these modules for an app, for example. If you're interested in building a web app, if you're interested in building a nice landing page with a few interactive tools, that's also much easier to do these days. But yeah, I think the important thing to remember is you need the data for sure for anything that you're trying to do in terms of building these tools, but that data by itself is or the calculations by themselves, that's not sufficient for this to work. The presentation has to be really nicely designed and presented as well,
right.
And it has to be easy to use. Again, I think I keep repeating myself, but that's because that was another hard lesson learned as we were experimenting with different types of tools.
Yeah, and I think it draws over to maybe a discipline that those of us who are deep in data and deep in, let's say, the ability to build a website, we have to maybe pull ourselves out of that. And where I would go, frankly, is I would go to a discipline like sales And the thing that I have loved when I've sat in really good, well-managed sales meetings is the order in which a salesperson is asking the questions. And, we have to port that over to a website and make that experience such that, maybe the outcome of that website is a full sale, but maybe it isn't. Maybe at the end, it's just you've filled out our little configurator. Would you like the results in a nice polished format? Leave your email here.
That's another excellent example. Yes, I think it's a give and take, for someone to share their contact information with you, I think you have to respect them, and you have to make them comfortable. And they should see the trade as being a fair one. If I'm sharing my contact information with you, obviously you're going to use it for a certain marketing purpose, which is fine. I think consumers, we are also understanding this trade-off. But please, again, do it tactfully, do it respectfully. And in my mind, again, that comes back to how you're going to use that contact information. Are you going to pass it to a third party immediately and get out of the relationship, or are you trying to nurture a relationship with that person, with that consumer, and help them in whether they're interested in a home service or a professional service? You're there to help them, and if they understand that, and they will understand that very quickly when they receive that first email from you, then you're on your way. The objective is to make them look forward to the second email, the third email, because there's value there for them.
That's right. And that is a high bar to set, because let's remember that what you were just describing was showing them something that they didn't know before their eyes, and that got them invested. So that is, in a way, what those future emails, or maybe the culminating question you're going to pose to them of, are you ready to speak with someone or hit the purchase button? We can't just go after, our great initial experience down into, hammer them with a buy message. We've got to keep that up. We've got to keep that level that we have established. We have to, continue at the level of authority that we have set ourselves.
Absolutely. If brands are capable of doing that, if they can demonstrate authority, and if they can also make people feel like they're now becoming part of a community, I think that satisfies so many needs in people, because maybe you're looking for an emergency plumber, in which case maybe you don't feel like you belong to a particular plumbing community, but even in that sense, you could make them feel a little at ease, perhaps, because it's not just you. You're not going to send informational emails to people who are looking for a plumber at the moment. But once you serve them, maybe your objective is to get that review, right? You want to continue with that interaction, and it can be at the lead generation touch point. It can be post services, after the actual transaction level. But the value is tremendous, because so far we've been talking about mostly an initial sale, but when you think about repeat purchases, the lifetime value of these prospects, I think because we reached a point in paid advertising where all of these major platforms are able to calculate the lifetime value of customers in different segments, and then suddenly you see huge spikes in cost per clicks and overall cost of advertising, because they get it. And then when you interact with their reps, that's exactly what they will tell you. How much is this worth to you? How much is this interaction worth to you? Yeah.
Now, neither you and I are being sponsored by any of the ad platforms, but you are correct that if we're properly attributing this traffic, and we get a big chance to do that when we've collected an email, and we can match that with an IP address and match back the different places that they had touch points. Yes, this conversation cannot be complete without saying you've got to keep it going forward and watch what the orders are that you eventually get and how those accumulate. And, this does, if we needed to have our data chops before for creating calculators, we need to carry that through too, to know what we will eventually earn out of them. But I think the best part of this, I think for marketers, especially marketers who have been browbeaten by CFOs and other people that they've asked for money, the payoff here is if you do know how much it can be worth over the lifetime of the customer, then you can stand, and have a firm backbone in saying, but we need this much budget for our future advertising, because we've proven that eventually all gets paid back plus profit.
That's such a great summary. Indeed, I think if you're going to do any type of math, that's one of the best ones to go for, to really have a good estimate on the lifetime value of each new customer, and then propagate that through all the way through your campaigns, so that you can find your ideal bidding strategy, essentially how much pain you can take in any type of paid campaign. And then I think, again, I think most of us have seen this tremendous increase in paid advertising, and even though you may have those numbers, even though you may have a lot more visibility than your average advertiser does in terms of the value of these interactions, there's still a lot more work to be done, in the sense that if you use the ad platforms for all of these interactions, it's going to get really expensive. But if you're able to build some of these landing pages, the email flows that we discussed, things that add value to the overall interactions or your subsequent interactions with your prospects, you will also be decreasing your overall cost of paid marketing over time. There's still cost involved. Obviously, content generation is going to cost you, because email platforms, sending the email itself is not going to be that expensive, but making sure that you're sending high quality content is another investment by itself, and we shouldn't minimize that. That can also be costly, just like the videos that we discussed at the
That's
beginning.
Right. That's right. You have to take not just the activity-based costs, but you have to take the deeper fixed costs. But I guess if we're this far into the math, you might as well take both sides, and then you can at least gain credibility from your senior leadership by showing them, look, I've done the all of it. I've checked out both the revenue. I'm not just selling you hockey stick projections. I've actually given you both,
Yes.
Because I'm going to have to ask for more costs here. And some of it may be fixed costs, so you won't see it, coming back immediately. But, I've done it all.
I mean, just the other day, I was in a meeting with one of our clients, and suddenly, in the middle of our meeting, the CFO walked into the room, and the marketing lead said, "Hey, by the way, I need to spend $10K more on these campaigns because they're converting." And then the CFO said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead. That sounds good."
Oh, amazing!
And because the chief marketing officer had the confidence that additional investment is actually going to pay off really nicely, because we were able to demonstrate how the campaign was performing up until that point. It's whatever it takes to have a transparent reporting in terms of how the campaigns are working. I think that's going to be appreciated by all the executives in a given organization, because they want to see how digital marketing is performing. And that was the initial promise, right? Being able to show how the ads are going to perform compared to your ads on newspapers. That was one of the biggest selling points of pay-per-click advertising originally.
That's right. That's right. So this explosion in channels that we've had, I guess the message we're leaving people with is, don't be afraid. You can let go of maybe the one channel that you began with. Just see it for what it is. It was a stepping stone. There are many more, and you should have them, but you can use all of the different pieces that Oz laid out to help you see the eventual payoff from setting all of this up. So to get a little meta for a second, Oz, you have, as I understand, a little calculator that people can try out to find some of these other channels. Would you tell people how they can get to that?
Yes, of course. This is a freely available tool hosted on our website, plumfind.com, and hopefully, if you come and see it, you will see that we try to follow some of these design principles that I mentioned earlier. We try to keep it as simple as possible, and we try to put ourselves in our users' shoes and understand what the impact of your top level objectives are in terms of the optimal combination of ad platforms for what you're trying to achieve. So, for example, if you're interested in lead generation and if you're interested in B2B, then naturally LinkedIn should be one of the top choices. But I think the point of the calculator is that LinkedIn is not the only choice. Yes, sure, go ahead and try that, but there are other platforms out there that might enable you to do, for example, job title based targeting, and they could nicely complement LinkedIn. And some of the ad platforms are not going to be for you because you said B2B and you said lead generation. So you don't have to spend your energy looking into those. So we're just trying to help people maybe save some time and gain a bit more confidence in terms of the effort they may put into in terms of exploring some of these additional ad platforms out there. And as you said, we're not affiliated to or with any of these ad platforms. We're an independent agency, and we just work for our clients, not the platforms.
And the calculator is not gated. You can just go ahead and use it anonymously, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about lead generation. It's not even a lead generation tool for us at the moment. What we did was actually, again, we have other tools that are paid on plumfind.com, but I think they were a tad too technical for our audience. So this is an experiment, in fact, for us to try to.
So you're practicing what you preach.
I'm trying to, Glenn. I'm trying to. It's not easy, but
No.
but yeah. So this is in some ways maybe a little contribution that we're hoping to make for our community, for other advertisers, also business owners who may want to come and see what kind of options are out there that may fit their business objectives.
Sweet. Well, thank you for openly sharing that with the community. And I'll put contact details on our show notes, not only for where they can get that, but if they want to reach out to you personally, Oz. So just finish by saying thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Glenn. This was a great opportunity. I love the show. I love the previous episodes, and it was such a privilege to be with you today.
Appreciate it. And to the listener, I hope you've gotten value out of what Oz said. If you have, think of someone else that you can share this with, or take one step that he has given you today to implement this in your own company. And I hope that he gave you something that can help you make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.